Hi, my name is Nigel Griffiths. I work at IBM Power Systems Advanced Technology Support in Europe. In this little movie, we're going to look at running quite an old version of AIX 5.2 on a Power 7 machine, and we can do that by some new features that AIX supports and running it in a workload partition. This information is taken from the AIX 7 announcement. At the same time, we announced another product called AIX 5.2 Workload Partitions for AIX 7 version 1.1. I include the feature code there that helps IBMers look up how to order it and how much it costs. We're told that it requires both AIX 7 and Power 7 to run. No other combination is allowed. This gives us a runtime environment of AIX 5.2, this particular release in the workload partitions environment that's been out since AIX 6, so that's been out a few years now. This gives us an excellent simple migration path for these older workloads running on older machines into a modern AIX and the very latest hardware. We simply need to create a makesysB on our old machine, pull it over to our Power 7 machine. We can then create a workload partition to run it. Also, note that we can still do live application mobility between machines. That is a feature that comes with a separate product, the Workload Partitions Manager, and that's still true. Now, a few little things about history of AIX 5.2, because we are going in computer terms way back in history. It actually came out in October 2002 and was aimed at the Power 4 machines that were available at the time. 2 years later, note that the next release, AIX 5.3, came out, and that was targeted at the Power 5 machines, making sure that it could use all the latest features available with that new processor and the new machines and firmware. Where AIX 5.2 couldn't actually fully use a Power 5 machine, it could run but not fully use it. The following 2 years, it became functionally stabilized. That's an IBM term for we stopped doing prime new function improvements to an operating system. It goes into bug fixes and security fixes being installed, and at that point, AIX 5.3 was where the major new functions were added. The last technology level, TL10, came out in June 2007, and then quite a long time after that, in mid-2008, it was withdrawn from marketing. At that point, you can't actually buy a copy of 5.2. Then I actually noted that the very last service pack, the last wrapping up of all the bugs and security fixes, was actually quite late. It was mid-2009. I'm actually amazed that we were still doing that for that older version of AIX. But we still find, even though this came out, 8 or 9 years ago, that a lot of people are still running AIX 5.2. There's that old computer term of it ain't broke, don't go fixing it. And to actually upgrade to a newer version of AIX does take quite a lot of work. You have to plan it, you have to do it, you have to retest. You may actually require new versions of the middleware and the application that you may or may not be able to get hold of. So what this product offers is you can run the same copy of AIX, the same middleware and the same application versions, but in a new environment on a AIX 7 running on top of a Power 7 machine. Once you've moved your applications off these older machines, you can simply remove them from your computer center. That will save you costs for electricity, heating and cooling. That will free up either floor space for these big old machines or rack space for some of the smaller ones. And you'll be able to stop the hardware maintenance. And let's face it, if you've been running these machines for 8 or 9 years, it's going to be difficult to actually get the spare parts even for them. When you've moved it onto a Power 7 machine, of course, you can expect quite a big performance boost, and that could be very useful. Or you could look at it the other way, you actually reduce the number of CPUs because it's Power 7, and that may actually reduce your software license costs. And to try out this technology, we had to create a makesysB for AIX 5.2, and it was a bit of a shock to the system because we take for granted what we have available these days. We have to think back to what it was like in those Power 4 days. So there's no shared CPUs. You have to allocate a whole dedicated CPU. There's dedicated adapters and no VIO support, so with no virtual disks and no virtual networks. No SMT was available, that came in with Power 5, and no DVDs, it's all CD drives, and no virtual optical either. You can boot off a physical CD drive, probably a SCSI one, or you can still do a NIM install, and that's in fact how we did it. This same feature is often called versioned WPARs. You might find that, for example, in the documentation or white papers. It's a little hint there that other versions of AIX may be using this method of being supported inside a WPAR. I often get asked, does that mean some of the older, even older versions of AIX are going to be supported? And the answer for that is probably no. It's more than likely that if we do support another version, it will be AIX 5.3 that we'll be going for, as that's a much easier target, and there'll be a lot of customers using that particular version. Also note that we're only going to support AIX 5.2 Technology Level 10 Service Pack 8. This is explicitly checked for when you do the creation of the workload partition. Now you've got to ask yourself, is that a problem? Well, the updates to this level are still available on Fix Central, and you can update your copy of AIX to this level if you haven't done already. As this has been functionally stable for a long time, many years now, it would have been a good move to actually be at this level anyway, because you'll have the maximum number of bug fixes and security fixes in your old copy of AIX. Also note that the AIX 5.2 install media is not going to be provided as part of this product. We are not going to encourage people to do a fresh install of AIX 5.2 at this stage of the game. This is a product for people already running AIX 5.2 and want to move up to the latest versions of the hardware. Now, as you run this AIX 5.2 in a WPAR, some of the new features that are available that are sitting underneath the WPAR actually become available too. For example, the Virtual I/O server will become available, so you could be running this WPAR on virtual disks over virtual networks. The SMT4 that we have with Power 7 gives us a speed boost, and that is available. As far as AIX 5.2 is concerned, you just seem to have a lot of CPUs. Also, AIX 7 could be using the AME, the Active Memory Expansion, and by compressing memory to make better use of memory under the covers. The WPAR will be unaware of these things going on. Also, because the WPAR only sees file systems as opposed to the real disks in the machine, the WPAR can be supported by newer disks, things that it's never seen before. Like SAS disks or solid-state disks are now available, can be underlying WPARs. DVD drives, for example, even 10 gigabit Ethernet wasn't invented at the time, and certainly not the 8 gigabyte fiber channel adapters. So all of that can actually be supported. The WPAR will not actually know that that's underneath the covers. So I'd just like to point out that the base WPAR functions come with AIX 6 or 7, and that gives you command line access but no mobility. If you want this extra AIX 5.2, then it's an extra product that you need to purchase, and if you buy the Workload Partition Manager, which is a Systems Director plugin now, that's when you get the mobility features, you get the graphical user interfaces, and it will understand the workload partitions for AIX 5.2 from the release 2.2.1, which I'm told is coming out in September. So how do we get this all running? Well, you've got to get up to that latest version of 5.2. You've got to take a makesysb of your root volume group. A lot of people do that anyway as a good way of backing the system up. You need to back up your other volume groups, perhaps your database or your application data. You copy all that to your new copy of the AIX 7 running on Power 7, your global copy of AIX. Then you add a package for the version WPARs, that gives you the new support. Then you run the make WPAR command, just as before, but you have two more options. The -C pulls in these extra packages for AIX 5.2, and the -B is just a way of pointing towards the makesysb file involved. You can then run this as a WPAR like you can before, and particularly adding the other file systems to bring in perhaps the database files or the application data. There's also an extra option to the lswpar command. -T for type and capital L gives you these legacy WPARs. Well, that's more than enough talking. Let's go and have a look at what it's like. We've already got AIX 7 installed on Power 7 machine. We need to install this VWPAR package. It includes these 4 items. We also need that AIX 5.2 makes his B available, and then we can create the WPAR and we'll have a look around inside. Okay, so I'm on my Power 7 machine. It's a Power 750 and I'm running AIX 7, and we're in the directory with these new VWPAR packages. I'm going to install those using good old Smitty. Current directory. Better pop down and accept new licenses, or it may give me error messages and refuse to do that. Okay, we pop down here, we can see here's the stuff selected and the all went in successfully. Okay, now we can use the lslpp command to go and find those. Let's find all the WPAR packages. So here's the boss WPARs, that's what comes with AIX itself, and here's the other VWPAR commands. Just clear the screen. I have a file here with the command for the make WPAR. That -n is the name, that's normal. The middle line there is the -C and the -B. The makes this B here is on my NFS repository. The last line is the standard stuff for the host name and network details. So we'll just run that. It's creating the various file systems. Now it's pulling in the details from the makes B, I think. I'll pull in another window here, and we can see if we use the df command that it's mounted all these file systems at the bottom here. And they should be slowly filling up. /user. At the moment, this one here, it's 12%. Run that again. There we are, it's 18%, so it's filling up rapidly. Okay, there we go. It took about 12 minutes to do that. I'm thinking when I was sitting here that perhaps I'm doing it over NFS, and if I did it on local disks, that could be quite a bit faster. Anyway, all looks good. It actually gives us a clue down here what to do to actually start it up. Okay, clear the screen and we'll start it up. Nice and quick. Over the file systems, here we go. And we can see the regular ones for opt, temp, user, var, and home and root file system. We actually see a couple of extra ones in here. And these are mounted on top of the AIX 7 opt, SBIN, and user. Haven't seen these before, so I assume these are some way of the WPAR to get access to these file systems, which will be having the AIX 7 version of a lot of the commands. Okay, let's clear the decks, and we'll do ls WPAR, and we see we have 3 WPARs. WP 15 and 14 are active, and WP 13 is just defined. And if we do the same command but with a -TL, we'll see that 13 and 15 are these versions of WPARs, because WPAR 14 is just a regular AIX 7 workload partition. Okay, now let's do telnet into 15. We could use clogin to get into there, but I do like to emphasize, don't use clogin, because things that you start there, particularly background processes, for example, and services, will not survive mobility. But if we turn it into it, okay, it looks like any other machine, and we'll use root to get into there. And this is exactly as we did it with the makesysb. You notice there was no password. That's because when we do makesysb, we delete the password before we actually make it and put it back afterwards. That means we can't forget the root password if we ever need to recover it. Okay, now let's just check a few things. Host name, as you'd expect. We better change the prompt here. That's not going to work very long, is it? So that's the host name that we captured the workload from. There we go. Let's hard code it in here. So what should we call this? VWPart WP15. Okay. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. A couple of other things in here. IF config -a. That looks exactly as it does with a regular workload partition. So here is our, it looks like our Ethernet adapter is actually an alias on the global copy of AIX. All this OS level -s. Yep, we're running 5.2 TL10 Service Pack 8, and that became available on the 30th week of 2009. Okay, let's try lsconfig and see what we can find about a machine. Okay, so some things don't work. The serial number doesn't work. And there's some other bits and pieces in here. That's standard for workload partitions, but yep, we can actually see that it's a Power 7 machine that we're running on. Okay, it was 64-bit. Don't worry about this. This is the name of our logical partition and its number. I just tend to put in the name of the logical partition the AIX release we're running in here. Some memory. Yep, we can see that this is a Power 7 machine as well. We've got some paging space in here, and if we carry on going, yep, we've got no resources because we don't have disks normally inside a regular workload partition unless we've assigned adapters into it. Okay, what else have we got in here? We got ls user. So here we have the /user from AIX 5.2. Now I don't want to go and prove that by logging onto an old AIX 5.2 machine. If we look at the disk defined inside our machine, here's the mount points for these NREs. Not sure what NRE, runtime environment, something new runtime environment, we don't know. Maybe Nigel's runtime environment, but I don't think it is. If we actually go in here though and have a look in here, let's get this back up, and then the new one, we'll see that they are quite different, and you'll notice that this has the X11R7 that appeared first in AIX6. So I'm pretty sure that this is the user file system in the AIX7 global copy of AIX, and it's mounted read-only, as we saw when we were looking externally. PS-F, I don't know sufficiently well if there's any differences there between AIX52 and AIX7. Let's have a look at some performance numbers. Topaz. Oh, well, 5.2 never had the Topaz command. That's a bit of a shame. I did notice that if, of course, you go to here, there is a Topaz there, so perhaps we could run that. No, we can't. We're running AIX 5.2, and that's requiring libraries that are not present, so we can't run AIX7 commands in this environment. Okay, so I'll need to go and get a copy of Nmon Classic if I want some of those performance numbers. Okay, so let me quickly do that. You don't have to watch this bit. So while you weren't looking, I went and got the latest copy of AIX Classic for AIX 5.2. Here it is. We'll start it up and we'll look at the CPUs. Now, there isn't a lot of point in looking at the performance inside a WPAR. We need to look at the global level. But we can see there's very little work going on here, so there's not much to look at. The individual CPUs. It doesn't understand threads, so it just sees them as a whole group of CPUs. Here's the memory. It's looking at a global copy of memory, so it sees all 4 gigabytes. Network is as you'd expect, and disks, well, it can't see any. Okay, let's look at the global level of AIX. Now, monitoring performance inside a WPAR doesn't make a lot of sense because you have to find out what the global copy of AIX is doing to understand what's going on. So we're back at the global level here, and perhaps we're going to try the new Topaz Nmon here, and I'll put in the @ sign, and we have the workload partitions. We can see 14 and 15 are running here, 13 is just defined, so it's not switched on at the moment. And if we do a capital W, we can see the workload partition manager. These are all the defaults in here. The shares haven't been set, but you can see what's going on. Interestingly, the workload partitions here, this is a regular one, it's gone down since AIX6, so they've done some work in here, and a WPAR is coming in at 26 megabytes of memory. That's quite amazing. And we've got 54 megabytes in use here for the versioned workload partition with AIX 5.2 in it, and it's using some space in NumPerm. Remember, it's got a different file systems it's having to load, so it's taking more of the file system cache. But again, that's small. I mean, combined, that's well under 100 megabytes of memory. Of course, we've just started it up and only run a few little commands. But the default, the base amount of memory used by a workload partition of either type is very small compared to AIX, which typically comes in at about 1 gigabyte to get you going. Now, if you flip into the Topaz mode, you can see here it's switched on the workload management classes in here. If we hit capital W, we go to the right mode and hit an ampersand as well, and here's our WPARs. We can see the percentage of memory being used in here. I've got 4 gigabytes of memory in this partition, and we can actually do things like, if we go down to a particular workload partition and hit F, we'll see that the processes down the bottom here are now the processes being used by that particular workload partition. If we go back up and hit F, these are the processes back at the global copy of AIX. Well, I hope that's given you an idea of what it's like to run a workload partition with AIX 5.2 in it. Before we finish then, I want to tell you a little bit about how they've actually managed to get this environment to work. First note, there's no virtualization or emulation layer involved in here. Everything will be expected to work at full speed. They analysed the 2 kernels, and we found that there were 13 system calls that needed adjustment. Perhaps the later versions of AIX have extra parameters available to system calls, and so those system calls are adjusted when we're in this environment so that they'll work as expected. Then they compared the system level commands that understand something about the kernel itself, and found that there are roughly 300 commands that actually would be aware of the fact that the kernel underneath has changed. So they've gone through all of those commands and made special versions of those that will run in this 5.2 environment, but on top of an AIX7 kernel. These new versions of these commands, when you actually do the install of AIX 5.2, it goes into this private/user, and these commands then are overwritten or fixed up as part of the installation. Also note that AIX 5.2 has no clues about new features or commands in later versions of AIX. And because those commands and libraries won't appear in the /user for the workload partition, we won't have access to those. So AIX 5.2 isn't going to get confused because the kernel underneath can do a whole lot more that it's unaware of. Also point out that there's some deep kernel level things that they've also got support for. There are some kernel extensions in AIX. There's never been very many, but just because you've got some, don't rule out this version WPAR environment. Some of those will be actually supported. Some performance tools are an example of commands that perhaps come from third parties that actually use the dev kmen method of getting data straight out of the kernel. and the top 25 popular symbols that they look for in the symbol table are actually supported, so they will actually still work even though there's a different kernel underneath. Also, we have the feature of being able to add PTFs and interim fixes, so if you've got some of those above the TL10 Service Pack 8, you can still apply those even in this environment, which, to be honest, is quite impressive. Well, that concludes our quick look at version WPARS running AX 5.2. I hope you found that interesting. If you didn't get the movie from this website, then the high resolution is available here, and you might find it easy to see what was on the screen as we were going. On this website is another 80 movies or so and a whole load of interesting technology.